Thank you guys for joining us today. We're going to go over some of the rules in regards to health and safety for North Carolina high schools. And I've got a couple of co-hosts with me. My name is Emily Gaddy. I'm the athletic trainer at Orange High School. I've been there for 10 years, and I'm also the co-host or co-chair for the practice settings committee, and I'm a member of the sports medicine advisory committee for the High School Athletic Association.
Hey there, my name is Johanna Williams. I am a co-chair for the Young Professionals Committee and a member of the practice settings committee. I am at Huff High School, which is in the Charlotte region, and I've been there for 5 years.
Hi, my name is Jay Dillon, athletic trainer at Durham Academy. Been here for 1 year. I am also the other co-host for the Young Professionals Committee for the NCATA, and I'm also the North Carolina representative for the MAATA-YPC.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. But before we do, there's a QR code on the screen that you can scan. We'll also include the link to it in the description of this video. But it's going to take you to an electronic handout that has a lot of these resources and rules and stuff listed out for you so that you can reference that later as you need to. All right, so the first thing we're going to get started with is some language for the Athletic Association and the Independent Schools Athletic Association. The rules that we're talking about today, for the most part, apply to both athletic associations, and we've tried to distinguish if there's a rule that's different between the two. But we do have Jay, who's with the independent schools, that will be able to answer any questions that might be specific to them. So some first things as we're reading through the rules, you're going to see a lot of times required and strongly recommended. So required means if you don't do this, there's going to be consequences. And for the athletic association, that now means a demerit system. We're no longer allowed to use a fine system, but there will be demerits, and they range from levels like 1 through 4. And what those demerits are going to be and how many for what thing is still being worked out with the State Board of Education. But as soon as we have those, they'll be published. And then strongly recommended means it's not required. We can't penalize you if you don't do it, but it is best practice. And if you don't do it and something happens, good luck in court explaining why you didn't do it. Right, the first set of rules that we're going to talk about is about our pre-participation physicals and then reviewing those. And throughout this presentation, you're going to see some statistics pop up, and those statistics come from a research done by Dr. Susan Edkins, where she looked at best practices and what should be done in secondary schools in North Carolina, and she compared how often they were done between athletic trainers and first responders. So for our physicals, both the North Carolina Board of Education and the North Carolina High School Athletic Association and the Independent Schools Athletic Association have policies that require the physical to be valid and on file. And so on file means that it's at the school, or if it's electronic, you have access to it at any time that you need to look at that physical. It can't just be that the kid says, yeah, I had it done, great. You've got to have that paperwork on file, again, either physically or digitally. Okay. And they have to have this before they can do any school-sponsored events, workouts, practices, off-season stuff, anything like that. If they're participating, they have to have that valid physical. Physicals are good for 395 days. The independent schools rule says 13 months, but again, those are comparable. So we're going to talk about what a complete physical is. We're going to go over the paperwork. And then for reviewing these physicals, an athletic trainer or the first responder needs to be the one that's reviewing these physicals. You need to know what's going on with your athletes. You need to know what possible concerns they may have or conditions that you may need to respond to in an emergency. And you need to be able to, review and access these anytime that an athlete comes in that's having a problem. And again, these should be on file prior to the athlete beginning. Okay, so when we're actually looking at the paperwork, it can seem a little confusing at first. There's a lot of information there. So that first section up at the top is just general information about the athlete, name, birth date, allergies, medications they're on, just kind of a general snapshot of what's going on with that athlete at that time. Okay, the next section is mental health questions. And you need to look at these. If an athlete has a score of 3 or higher, it's considered positive for mental health complications. And so you need to make somebody else aware at your school. We're all mandated reporters. So this needs to be reported to, it could be your school nurse, it could be an administrator, it could be guidance counselor, it could be social worker. So just know who at the school needs to be notified. So I notify our social worker and our head of guidance, and just, hey, this is what this student responded to. I'm just putting them on your radar. And then I make note of those athletes so that if they seem to be struggling exceptionally hard, or if they're dealing with an injury, I know that I may need to do some more mental health work with them than maybe I necessarily would another athlete. All right, the next section is the medical history portion, and it's all of the yes and no questions. And so this is going to give us a lot of information about our athletes, things that they may have had in the past or they're still currently dealing with. But the way these questions are phrased is so that if an athlete answers yes to any question, then that's something you need to look at. They're having a problem in that area. If they answer no to everything down the board, then they're perfectly healthy. And so those yes answers will jump off the paper at you. And it's easy to find where you need to review and look at that athlete a little bit more. All right, the next portion is on the bottom of page 2, and it's a parent and athlete signature and date. So you need to make sure that both the athlete and the parent have signed and dated this form for it to be complete. Moving on to pages 3 and 4, these are the ones that the doctor completes. And so that top portion, or the main portion of this page, is going to be their physical examination. So where the doctor is going to check, height, weight, vision, internal, and then orthopedic things. And so they'll mark if something's abnormal or not. Okay, and then at the bottom of that page is a place for the doctor to sign. So they need to sign it and date it, and then they need to fill out the information about their doctor's office or put their stamp there. And then on the 4th page, this is where the doctor is going to mark if they're eligible for sports or not. Those first 2 check boxes, if one of those is checked, the athlete is eligible for sports. The difference is on the second one, the doctor is recommending that they follow up with something. It could be they noticed their vision was poor, so follow up with ophthalmology, something like that, but they're still clear to participate. The bottom 3, they are not eligible to participate for sports at this time. It may be any sports. It could just be for contact sports, the doctor might specify, or it could be that they need to follow up and get something else checked out, maybe by a cardiologist or another type of doctor before they're cleared. So if any of those 3 boxes are marked, the athlete's not clear and further follow-up needs to happen. Okay, and then there's another signature place for our doctors. So they have to sign and date in both of these places. The dates should match unless the doctor has specified like date of exam versus the date that they filled the form out. If the doctor has specified between the 2, then date of exam is the date that we go off for their eligibility. If the dates don't match, you need to contact the doctor's office and figure out why there's a discrepancy and what the date of exam was. And then finally, at the bottom of that page, again, is just a snapshot. It's emergency information. So just quickly what allergies the child has, medications, other information, and emergency contact. So this would be something that could be given or shown to EMS or something like that. Now, a lot of us across the state have switched to Dragonfly. Our athletic directors have to use it for scheduling games and referees and coaching compliance. And so a lot of us are also using it for athlete registration and collecting all of their paperwork. So when we're looking at the physical part on here, I've just narrowed this down to where you can see medical history, and this is the physical exam, so the third page, and then the fourth page is the next column, which is the medical eligibility. And so on here, what's good is when they fill out the medical history portion, if you see a number next to that checkbox, that is the number of questions that the athlete answered yes to. And so if you click on it, it's going to bring up the form. You can actually scroll through and read the form. Or if you click on where there's the number at the top next to the print button, it'll pop up a window and it will tell you which questions they answered yes to. And then when they explain their yes answers, it has those there. For this one, this person listed an allergy, and I'll show you where you can find out what that is. Okay, so if they listed an allergy, you're going to see like this little sneezing, coughing face under allergies. And if you hover over it, it'll pop up and tell you what the allergy is. So this athlete is allergic to tree nuts. And then if the athlete has any other medical condition going on, you'll see a little symbol under medical. And again, if you hover over it, I know this one athlete says asthma, but if you hover over it, it'll tell you what that medical condition is.
Alrighty, and next we're going to talk about emergency action plans. These are a vital part of your, athletic training and being in a secondary school. As you can see here from the study that was completed, only 84% of athletic trainers reported having an EAP. We really need this number to be closer to 100. This is a huge liability to not have an emergency action plan. And if there is an adverse event, if you don't have an emergency action plan posted, you could be held liable. So we'll kind of go into what is needed in an EAP. So Gefeller-Waller, concussion law, and the NCHSAA requires the following components in an EAP. It must be in writing, reviewed by the AT, licensed in North Carolina, and approved by principal and admin, so like your athletic director. It should be distributed to anybody that would potentially need to be helping with an emergency action plan. It needs to be posted to all venues, reviewed, and rehearsed with anyone that could be potentially assisting you, such as coaches or administration. And we'll go over kind of different components, but it does need to have directions to venues, roles established, communication established, what emergency equipment is available and where this equipment is located, how emergency transport can get to different venue sites, and then different lightning and thunder safe location requirements. They know how to get to certain locations. It should also identify where all emergency equipment is on site. So if you have 3 AEDs on your campus, you should have the location of every AED in your EAP. You should also have things like cold immersion tubs, lents, rectal thermometers, things like that, where their location is in your EAP. And then you should have a designated lightning space in case you do have thunder and lightning. Where are student athletes going to go? Where are parents going to go if they're there for an event? And you should have this for every venue location. The safe lightning space may be different for your baseball field than what it is for your football field. So making sure that you know where that is and that your AD and admin know where those locations will be. So if you run into lightning, they can communicate that to everyone. And like I said, it should be, every EAP should be specific. So if you have a softball field, a baseball field, tennis courts, football field, all of those should have their own specific EAP. Directions for EMS are going to be different for each one. Location of emergency equipment is going to be different for each one. So make sure that you understand that that needs to be posted everywhere. And these should be posted at every venue location. So if you have a football field and then a practice field next to it, you should have an EAP posted at both locations. You should have an EAP posted at both softball and baseball if you have both of those fields. There's different ways that you can do this. You can go as cheap as printing it out, having it in kind of like a little clear binder and having it posted at a site to keep it kind of weatherproof. Or you can get, metal plates made and put at each location. I've also seen schools where they have little bifolds and they have inserts that go into the bifolds where you can pull them out for every location. And if you, don't have these posted and need ideas, feel free to reach out to people and we can give you ideas on how to get that posted at your specific venues. And then making sure that it is reviewed and rehearsed and what you have written down makes sense and is feasible. So, depending on your area, you may be able to work with local EMS. So that way they know you, they know what your policies are. You guys can practice them together with them, as well as with school administrators. So, who's going to be your game day admin, having potential different game day admins and ADs rehearsing these with you, as well as coaches and other personnel that could be present. So anyone that might be there that would be helping you with an emergency situation, going over, reviewing the EAP with them so they understand what their roles are, and then also practicing it to make sure that you kind of get any kinks out if you have any issues. And this EAP should be distributed to everyone that would be relevant in helping out with an emergency situation. And then pregame EAP review, this is considered strongly recommended to have done. This should be done for every athletic event that happens, not just football. So if you have, a volleyball game going on or a cross country event, this should be completed. This is basically saying that you, the game day admin, if there are any officials, anybody that basically will need to be helping out with an emergency action plan, have gone over the EAP for that event that day. And it's got things like plane reviewed, location identified, safe shelter identified, wet bulb temperature, all that good stuff. It's got everything on there. This should be completed for every game and held on file.
All right, so the next section of rules that we're going to move into is about environmental conditions. Specifically, we're going to talk about heat, lightning, and cold. And on here, when you look at the statistics, I know there's several there, but what we're kind of most concerned about is the percentage of people that are unsure. We should know if we have these rules or not. So for the first rule is our heat acclimatization policy. And this graphic is floating around on the NCATA Facebook page and Instagram. But just to review, the first 5 days are a formal practice, no longer than 3 hours total, 1 session per day. And during those first 5 days, for days 1 and 2, they can be in helmets only. For days 3 through 5, helmet and shoulder pads only. And then days 6 through 14 is full equipment and contact are permitted. They can do double practice days, but it has to be followed by a single practice day. And double practice days should be no longer than 5 hours total practice. So just making sure that our teams are adhering to those policies while they're out starting next week. The next rule is our monitoring of the weather and then suspending it for heat. And so every school should be taking a wet bulb globe temperature reading. That is what's expected by the Athletic Association. And so here's our chart for when we should be suspending practices. Okay, so this chart only applies to practices. It does not apply to games. But I would recommend, altering maybe water breaks, things like that based off of the heat for games, or moving those times later, working with your AD, see if you can move those times later so that they're not in the black or red zone. But again, this chart is just for practices, and these temperature readings need to be taken on location. and should be taken at each field. Because across the campus, I know the other high school in my district, if you're down on their practice football field, it can be 2 or 3 degrees on the wet bulb globe reading warmer than at the top part of their campus. So make sure that you're taking site-specific measurements. And these should be taken at least 30 minutes or no more than 30 minutes prior to the start of practice. And then you're taking them every hour that they're outside. And making sure that we're recording these. I know if you have a Kestrel unit, you can capture them and download them to an app or to your computer later. And making sure that when we take that first reading, that we let the wet bulb thermometer acclimate to being outside if we've stored it inside. So letting it sit out there for 5, 7, 10 minutes before we actually take that first reading. Otherwise, it still could be giving us readings that are influenced by it being inside. Next is a tool that is on your handout, and this is from University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and it is a wet bulb globe temperature predictor, and so it will give you the next 5-ish days out. The closer it is to the day that you're looking at, the more accurate it will be, but it's giving you a prediction of where that wet bulb globe temperature is going to be. I send this out to my coaches and my ADs Sunday night or Monday morning, just so that they're prepared for what's going to be happening that week. We can go ahead and look at maybe adjusting practice times, or, they can go ahead and have a plan for, hey, on Wednesday, I'm probably going to have us inside, so I need to come up with an indoor practice plan, or maybe we'll go to film first and then go outside. So this is a good tool to use so you can give your coaches and your ADs that information so that they're not caught off guard when you're like, hey, we need to suspend practice today. Okay, so again, on those heat guidelines, we have them for acclimatization and monitoring or modifying our practices. And across the state, we're doing pretty well. But again, we just need to make sure that we're consistent and that we're holding our teams and our coaches accountable to being inside when it is too hot. And then for caring for heat stroke, anything with a star, there's an athletic association policy for it. And so we should have that. We have to be able to take a accurate core body temperature is what the rule book says, and we all know how that most accurate way is through rectal temperature. And so if that's not a policy that you're allowed to have, I encourage you to talk with your athletic directors, your principals, your school board to make sure that you can do that. And if not, get in writing that they're not allowing you to do it. Okay. We should also cool first, transport second, use cold water immersion, either in a tub, taco with a tarp, can use a body bag. We just need to have a means to do total cold water immersion for our athletes. All right, I know this is a lot of words. I copied it straight from the Federation, which is where the Athletic Association gets their lightning policy. But the big thing here is that if you see or hear thunder or lightning, we need to be going inside. We can monitor it with apps, see how far away it is. But once we see it or hear it, we need to head inside. And then it's 30 minutes from every time lightning or thunder strikes again before we're clear to go outside. And there is a little asterisk that says, at night, under certain atmospheric conditions, lightning flashes can be seen from a distance. In these cases, it may be safe to continue the event. If no thunder can be heard and the flashes are low on the horizon, the storm may not pose a threat. For most of us in North Carolina, that does not apply. We are surrounded by hills, by trees. If we can see the lightning, it's close enough. So unless you're right on the coast or you're right on the top of a mountain, that little asterisk does not apply to you. So just making sure that we're clearing them. We need to be inside by the time the storm's 10 miles out. Okay, and so again, we have rules for all of these. We have to have a lightning safe space. Johanna already talked about it with our EAP. We have to suspend the practice, the event, whatever for thunder and lightning, we have to use the 30-minute rule. And then there needs to be a staff member that's assigned to monitor the weather conditions. That may be you as the athletic trainer, it may be the athletic director, it may be someone else on your sidelines, but there should be somebody assigned to monitor storms. And then there's somebody that's there to notify the referees. And in North Carolina, the referee cannot overrule whoever is monitoring the weather. So if whoever's monitoring the weather says we need to clear and go inside, that's it. You clear and go inside. The referee, the coaches, they cannot argue with whoever has been designated to monitor and notify of storms. For cold, both the independent schools and the athletic association don't have a statewide rule about cold. Okay, we know that it can vary across the state. What people in the mountains consider cold is probably a lot colder than what I consider cold. And so there are recommendations on how to modify due to weather and how to care for cold related injuries. But if you're in a part of the state that is frequently impacted by cold weather for our outdoor sports, then we strongly recommend that you have this conversation with your athletic directors and come up with some sort of policy for your school or your district to know when you're going to modify practices or events due to cold weather.
Alrighty. Next, we'll talk about athletic trainer compliance and kind of what goes into that as being a licensed athletic trainer in the state of North Carolina. So to be a licensed athletic trainer in the state of North Carolina, you must have gotten your licensure through the NC Board of Athletic Training Examiners, and you should be shown as active under their website. So if you have not done that, I would go onto their website and get that done. So that way you can be legally practicing as an athletic trainer. And then new this year, every athletic trainer that works in a secondary school needs to complete the athletic trainer compliance form prior to working with the NCHSAA member school. To do that, the next page. So you're going to go onto the NCHSAA website. This is the home page. You'll toggle over the health and safety. Don't click on it, just toggle over it. And then if you're an athletic trainer, click athletic trainer. If you're a first responder, click first responder. And it'll take you to the form. It's super quick, it takes like less than 5 minutes to fill out. But everyone that is working at a NCHSAA member school needs to complete this form. I think, was this you or me, Emily? I can do it if you want me to.
You can go for it.
Okay. So knowing where to be, obviously, you know, working in a high school, you've got a lot of things going on at one time. So understanding legally where you need to be for best practice. So if you have a football practice or football game and they are wearing equipment, so that means a helmet or more, legally, you have to be on site at that practice or game. You may have a football practice going on a separate field and a home soccer game going on. Legally, you need to be at the football practice, assuming that they have equipment on, even though there is an athletic event going on. This is a state law. So if you have any coaches or admin that have issues with this, please feel free to, you know, remind them that this is state law and that is where you legally need to be. And then wrestling, obviously that's not until the winter time, but athletic trainers do have to be present for all wrestling events. So if there's not an athletic trainer or first responder present, the wrestling event cannot happen. And same goes with football games. So if you have a home or an away football game, you are supposed to travel or be present at that home or away football game. Your JV football team should not travel to an away site and you not travel with them. You should be with your football team at all times, regardless of whether it's home or away. And then, you know, it's kind of expected that if football's done, but you have other events going on, that you're at those home events. Especially if it's something that's a contact sport. So that's kind of strongly recommended. And you can see on the side, that's where, you know, what athletic trainers say that they are, you know, present for contact sports, non-contact sports, and then any home event really should be covered by an athletic trainer if it's at your home school. And then away wrestling events and other contact sport events that are away. Legally, you don't have to travel with these, but if you're able to, that's great. Or if you have multiple athletic trainers at your school, it'd be a great idea to send someone with an away team if you have the resources for it. Obviously, not every school has that ability, so it's kind of dependent upon your specific situation. And then, so whoever is, you don't have to have an athletic trainer. It can be a first responder, while athletic trainers would be the stronger recommended healthcare provider there. Some schools do have, coaches who have first responder training and they're providing care. That does happen, especially a lot of rural areas. But, it is strongly recommended that ATs be at, campuses if they're available.
And just a reminder that a person cannot serve as the first responder or athletic trainer and be a coach at the same time. So those have to be two distinctly different people. So for the next part, we're just going to go over the concussion return to play paperwork. Make sure everybody's on the same page with that. So for the question. Yes.
Can an athletic director serve as the first responder?
An athletic director may, as long as they are not also a coach at the same time.
But if they have athletic director duties at the same time, is that allowed?
They have to be physically, like if we're talking football, wrestling, they have to be physically present. So if they can do both duties at the same time and be physically present, then they have met the requirements. But if they cannot be physically present on the football field or on the wrestling mat, then it needs to be a separate individual.
Thank you.
All right, so for our Gfeller-Waller paperwork, the Gfeller-Waller law has 3 parts: concussion education, which is the form that they fill out and the video that it's watched. If you're using Dragonfly, that's all now handled online. Having an emergency action plan, which we've already gone over, and then the immediate removal from play. If an athlete is suspected of having a head injury or reports any signs or symptoms of a concussion or has visible signs and symptoms of a concussion, they are removed from play that day and cannot return until they've received a medical evaluation and have completed return to play when or if they're diagnosed with a concussion. Okay, so this is one we're all familiar with, but it's the Gfeller-Waller form. If you're still collecting these on paper, you have to make sure that each of those boxes is initialed by the parent and the student. They can't initial the top one and then like draw a line all the way through. Each box has to have their initials. And then it needs to be signed and dated at the bottom. If they're filling this out on Dragonfly, it won't let them finish the form unless everything is initialed. So if they've done it on Dragonfly, they've completed it properly. Okay, and when we look at who can do that medical evaluation, there's 5 people that can do it: doctors, nurse practitioners, neuropsychologists, physician assistants, and athletic trainers. For those doctors, your options are a medical doctor or a doctor of osteopathy. Ideally, a proctologist or gynecologist should not be doing concussion evaluations. So we need to make sure that whatever doctor has done the evaluation is somebody who has received concussion training, or that's at least in their realm of responsibilities. Okay, so we've got an athlete, we suspect them of a concussion, now what? We want to remove that athlete immediately from play and then complete this first form. And it's the concussion injury history form. This one can be completed by anybody. It could be a coach, it could be a parent, it could be the athletic trainer. It doesn't matter, but it gives whoever's going to be looking at them next a snapshot of what this athlete looks at right now, either right as the concussion happened, maybe you saw them the next day. But we know a lot of times our kids may not go to the doctor till 3 or 4 days out, and they look completely fine. And so we want to give the next medical professional a snapshot of the injury when we suspect they have a concussion. Okay. All right, I already did that one. There we go. All right, so page 2 or the next page, this is where the medical professional who does the evaluation sends back their recommendations. And again, this form can be filled out by an MD, a DO, a licensed athletic trainer, nurse practitioner, physician assistant, or neuropsychologist. If it's an athletic trainer filling it out, you need to make sure that your doctor is okay, your overseeing physician is okay with you doing this and it's in your protocol. Or if you work for clinic outreach, that that is okay with your manager. If you're in the school, you need to make sure that the Board of Education, your athletic director, whoever's over your county, is okay with the athletic trainer being the one to do this. If not, they need to be referred to one of the other ones doing it. This next one is the return to learn accommodations. So again, this can be filled out by anyone of those 5 people that are allowed to. But this lets them know what needs to happen in the classroom so their athlete can be the most successful in the classroom while they're recovering, and that the classroom is not causing their concussion symptoms to be exacerbated or for that recovery to take longer. There's a lot of times that I will fill this out for the kid the night before, like when they go back to school, so that they've got those accommodations right then and there, if they're not able to go to a doctor for 2, 3, 4 days. But these can be sent to the teacher once it's completed. It can be sent to guidance. So if you're an outreach athletic trainer, you're not at school all day, having somebody that you can send these forms to, it could be the nurse, again, it could be guidance, so that these accommodations can get out to their classroom teachers, so that they're being helped in the classroom. And by state law, these accommodations have to be followed and completed. But we don't want the child to still be receiving accommodations and still struggling in the classroom and start return to play. They need to be completely okay in the classroom in their daily activities before we look at return to play. And so for return to play, 5 stages. Okay, only 1 stage can be completed each day. It's 24 hours apart. You cannot do stages 1 and 2 on the same day. They are separate days. And for athletic trainers, we can do all 5 stages. For our first responders, they're only able to go through stage 4, and then they need to have communication with the healthcare professional that signed that first form before they can move on to stage 5. Okay, so this communication may be through a phone conversation, it may be through a fax, but they have to get permission before moving on to stage 5. And then finally, our athlete has completed all 5 stages. They're ready to rock and roll. This form needs to be completed by the healthcare professional that's been overseeing their return to play. It could be a physician, it could be the athletic trainer, whoever's been overseeing that return to play signs off on it. And then the parent also signs off that they are okay with their child returning to play. So we need to make sure we have all those signatures in place before the athlete returns to competition. Okay, so again, how do we know like our students are good to go? And this is something that definitely go over with your coaches so that they understand, go over with the parents. But they've got to have that first page completed and returned, especially if you were not the one that looked at them first. They need to be evaluated for their concussion and that evaluation form completed. If necessary, their return to learn accommodations need to be granted and put in place, and then they need to be completely okay in the classroom before they start return to play. Once return to play is completed, then they need that final form.
Alrighty. Next, we're going to talk about Atlas. Every year, Atlas needs to be updated. If you have not done Atlas before, you can either use this website that's on here, or you can just Google search Atlas Athletic Training and it will take you to it. It's going to be the UConn website address. You just go on there, you can search by state, choose your school, and update your information. This helps keep a good track of what high schools have and a licensed athletic trainer at the school. If they have multiple athletic trainers, it's just a really good way to kind of keep track of all of that information. It's also very handy if you have someone coming to visit your school, or you're going to visit another school and you're coming, you can get contact information easily via this resource. I think right now it is down until August 1st, but starting Monday, you can go in and update your information. AED maintenance, so making sure that any AEDs that you're responsible for are being checked. You should check these monthly. They all have a function where you can press it, make sure that it is functioning normally, that nothing's expired. And if there is an issue with it, it will tell you what the issue is so you can get it taken care of. You should keep record of when you do this, and you should keep record of when any pads expire, batteries, and other parts that go along with it. If you have a mask with it or anything, making sure that all of that is up to date and not expired. Also, just a little plug, everyone should log all their AEDs onto the PulsePoint AED app. This is, if you look at the little yellow heart, that's what the app looks like. You can log all of your AEDs that you have at your school into there. So that way, if someone, is having a cardiac issue close to the school and they have this app, they can log on and see, oh, there's an AED at this location. And they can potentially, be able to save the person's life quicker than, waiting for EMS, depending on how long that takes. Catastrophic injury reporting. If you have any catastrophic event, regardless of what the outcome is, whether it is fatal or if the person fully recovers, please make sure to enter it into the National Center for Catastrophic Sports Injury Research. The hyperlink works for that, and then you can also just use the web address that I posted below. This just helps us keep track of the good work that athletic trainers are doing in responding to catastrophic injuries, and also keeping track of what those outcomes are whenever these injuries happen at high schools. And then everyone should understand what the prescribed appliance form is. You can find this on the NCHSAA website under the health tab, under for schools. It'll be one of the links that are on there. If you have someone, typically these are used if you have a student athlete wearing a cast. Most sports that really use them is football and soccer. Those are kind of the two main ones. If you have a student athlete that has a cast on and they want to play, they must have medical clearance from their MD that they saw for their injury, saying that they're allowed to participate with the cast on. And then the student athlete and parent must be in agreement to participate. If you see on there, the parent does have to sign the form saying that they're okay with their kid participating with a prescribed appliance. I have had kids and parents who are uncomfortable competing with a prescribed appliance, even though the coach may have wanted them to compete. So make sure you have that conversation with your student athlete and with their parent. And the form must be filled out completely. The student athlete, or you should be going over this form with the student athlete with the prescribed appliance on, so the foam cast or the foam padding on, and you need to show it to any official that's at the event, whether it's, football, soccer, whatever it is. The official has to check the actual appliance, make sure that it's good, and see the form. And then once they okay it, you're good to go. If they say that it's not okay, then you need to fix it in whatever way that they want. It needs to be 1/2-inch thick, high density foam if you are doing any foam covering on a cast or splint. Kramer makes one that's really good for it. So usually I just buy the Kramer ones and kind of keep those on hand if necessary. And then a couple last topics before we're finished. This goes back to EpiPens and other medications, going over the pre-participation physicals and understanding what history your kids have. If you have a student athlete that needs an EpiPen, that needs insulin, that needs an inhaler, making sure that you kind of know who these kids are and going over with them, making sure they understand how to use what they need for medications, and having a face to a name. That way, if an event does happen, you kind of have a better understanding of what could potentially be going on. So making sure to kind of find all those kids, reach out to them, let them know that you're there to help. Sometimes they'll even have extras where you can hold on to them in case they forget theirs at home. You'll have an extra with you to be able to use in case they do have an event. Inventory list. This is something that you should do especially if you're new to a school, going in, figuring out everything that you have, going through what's expired, getting rid of what's expired, and kind of making a list of things that you need. Maybe you go through and realize you don't have a rectal thermometer. This is something that you need to, bring up with your AD and admin that, this needs to be budgeted for the next order. Travel care and courtesy. If you have athletes that need taping or need things kind of in that regard, make sure that you either do it before they leave if you're not traveling with them, or send equipment with them and let the home athletic trainer know to be expecting to tape them. That way, you don't have kids trying to sneak in and play when they're not supposed to be. And also you're not using someone else's supplies that may not have enough to, tape a bunch of traveling kids. It's also important to meet with people around your area, other ATs at the other high schools in your area, and other medical professionals. Know who the doctors are that you're referring to. Know your different urgent cares, your emergency rooms, your physician's offices. If you have someone that you kind of refer to consistently, stop by, meet them in person, know what they offer at that location. Do they offer just X-ray? Do they offer other things like ultrasound? Kind of understanding what can be sent and what can be done. It's important to know. It also helps, if you have a kid that goes without telling you, they'll say, oh, hey, you're an athlete at this school. They can reach out to you and let you know what's going on. So it just, makes for a more fluid line of communication. Know important people at your school, like your SRO. It's going to be your security resource officer. Some schools have one, some schools have multiple. Any of them that are going to be kind of on campus, especially during athletic events, go meet them, introduce yourself to them, get their contact information. So if you do have an incident, they can help respond with you. And same with, front office admin and staff, get to know everyone at the school. It's important to kind of, build those relationships, and they can definitely help you down the road. One thing that's super important is liability insurance. So making sure that you are covered. All healthcare professionals should be covered by liability insurance, us included. NATA has a relationship with a company, and it's fairly affordable. I think it's less than like $200 for a year. And that covers, all liability for any events that you might pick up. And it's important to understand, if you have it through, a hospital system, if you go and cover a random college camp one weekend, that's not covered. So you need to have, additional liability insurance on top of that. If you have questions about that, feel free to reach out. I know as a new grad, it can seem really daunting to spend that much money on something that you may think isn't necessary. But if you do have an adverse event where you may be taken to court for any reason, it's really important to have that additional coverage. And then kind of on top of that, liability issues, documentation. Make sure you document everything. Document every treatment you have with a student athlete. If you have an adverse event with an administrator, with a parent, with a kid, make sure you're documenting all of this. So that way, if anything ever does go to court, you have records of how you handled a situation, what you did from a rehab standpoint with a kid, from an injury evaluation with a kid. It's just a really good CYA thing to make sure that you're doing. Alrighty, and then next slide, and then follow everybody on social media. So if you have any of these socials, please follow everyone. This will give you up-to-date information on events that might be happening, maybe new policies that come out, things that need to be done from our end. So make sure you're following all of these social media accounts.
All right, we're going to open the floor for questions. There was a couple that came through the chat. But for our athletic association, athletic trainers, each region has a SMAC, the Sports Medicine Advisory Committee representative. So these are the representatives for your area. A good number of them are on the call today. But if you have any further questions, comments, concerns about rules or the way things are going, reach out to your regional representative, and we take those questions and comments and concerns back to the Athletic Association, get answers where we need them. And then if we start to see common threads between, comments and concerns, looking at addressing those so that our athletic trainers are doing the best that we can in all of these different situations. Okay, so the first question came in about, I gotta scroll back up. It was both about physicals. So Takia pointed out that on the new physical, the first 2 pages say, like, don't submit that to the school. If you go and pull that physical, I don't have one in front of me, but it comes from the American, I think it's Academy of Pediatrics. The new version for this year does say that on there. If you go and pull the physical from the Athletic Association website, the last time I looked at it, it did not have those words on it. So you can use that. If your athletes are registering through Dragonfly, they're going to fill all those questions out anyway, and you're going to get it. But I would just talk with your athletic directors, principals, and you need to be able to look at that, because unless the parent lists everything that they gave a yes answer to on that last page with a kind of summary, you're not going to know, like, if the child has sickle cell or anything like that. The next one that asked was, can the physician override the 395-day rule and like give an extra 30 days on it, if the athlete's not able to get in to the doctor? The answer to that is no. The 395 days is a state school board policy, as well as an athletic association rule. And so we have to follow the rule because it's a state school board policy. So like when COVID, when they gave that like year-long extension, that had to first be approved by the North Carolina State School Board, and their rule changed so that we could change our rule. So the simple answer to that is no. They have 395 days. If it's after that, it's expired. And then someone just asked about Dragonfly. It is a statewide platform, kind of. So that's what the Athletic Association has switched to instead of using home campus. So all of the schools have to at least use it to have a school profile, put in their directory information. So like who their coaches are, who the athletic trainer is. They have to put their schedules in, and they book referees through that. And that's where coaching eligibility is tracked. Each school does not have to use it for athlete registration and like filling out paperwork and uploading physicals, but it is a free platform. So if you don't have another EMR or athlete registration, I would recommend it. It's free. You might as well use it. So yes, it's required for some things, but for what we do, no. And then there was one about wet bulb globes and readings and those sports that practice off campus. I know that can be tremendously difficult. My suggestion for that would be maybe over a couple of days in different hot weather conditions, take a reading at your school and take it at tennis. Was this person's, see how much they differentiate, or do they run about the same? Does one a little bit cooler or a little bit warmer than the other? So that you at least have an idea in your head where that other location may be at. Or if you can find a comparable location on campus. But otherwise, yes, that's difficult. Let's see. Johanna J, feel free to hop in. Any advice?
The data therm one,
Yeah.
someone said, how often does a data therm need to be inspected? I believe it's every 2 years. And I think for those, it does have to be sent off to be, or at least I bought mine through Henry Schein, and I had to send mine off to get it inspected. So that is a good point to kind of note if you are, having, or like recalibrated, I guess I should say. If you are having that done, kind of choosing a time of year, maybe in the winter time when you don't really need it, to be able to send that off and get it recalibrated and checked.
I'd also say, put the batteries in at the beginning of fall, take them out at the end of fall so they don't corrode in there. And then, when you're going back out for spring and you need it, put them back in. Just so,
I'm pretty sure those cases have like a battery section, like a little part in the foam, so you don't need to keep the batteries in it and wear them out. You just have them whenever you're ready to use it.
And put your extra batteries in there. Let's see, any advice on dealing with a pediatric office that sends almost every physical form back without vision and sometimes even without blood pressure info? Let's see, and then in regards to vision, the office states they're completing the forms based on wellness exams where they only have to do vision every couple of years, or if the kid has a specific vision complaint. I would talk to the office manager of that location. The office manager is going to be the one that can communicate with all of the nurses and doctors and just explain that you need that information, and they can put the last vision screening that the child had. But that, these are medical forms and you need a baseline for the athlete. Just, if they get hit in the eye and you need to see if maybe they always had bad vision in that eye, or, they've got high blood pressure, is that normal for them? But I think the office manager is going to be your gateway to getting that information out to that particular doctor's office. Okay. Can you explain the return to participation forms following illness and injury? Is there a difference for football on these forms? So yes, there are 2 forms up on the website. Let me pull up the Athletic Association website and I'll bring it over. So under health and safety, there is, so return to play after illness, and then return to play after injury. The return to play after illness, this form is out there as a way to document, like if you don't have another form that's typically used. And so if an athlete has mono or COVID, it's just a way to communicate with a physician that this athlete is cleared to go after injury or illness, after they've missed 5 days. For the injury one, an athletic trainer can sign off on that. Okay, so if we've been treating an athlete for an injury, they've been, out of play, out of practice for 5 or more days, then they have to have medical clearance to return back. So again, this is just another way to document that, but this would be for any like orthopedic injury that an athletic trainer would treat them for. So illnesses where they're out for 5 or more days have to go to a doctor. MD, DO, PA, NP. The injury ones can be completed by the athletic trainer.
Can I add something to that? This is Eric Hall from Cary High School.
Absolutely.
All right, so there's a hidden one in there. So if they miss 5 days, they have to be cleared with a note. But I want to make sure everybody knows there's also in the handbook under football, practicing conditioning, and I'll read it to you. If an athlete misses 5 or more consecutive days of practice, they must participate in at least 3 separate days of practice before returning to competition. So a football player cannot just be cleared on a Wednesday or Thursday and play Friday if they miss 5. And I don't think a lot of coaches even know this.
Correct. That one was added in last year. That would have been a good one to update in the main slides. So thank you, Eric.
Yep.
So again, yeah, the football, they have to practice an additional few days before they can return back.
Making sure reacclimatization.
Yep.
Pre-game EAP review, only football or all sports? It is strongly recommended that that is done for all sports.
Yeah, and it's strongly recommended across the board. Prior to this year, it was required. It has now gone back to strongly recommended. But we all know that's in the best interest of our athletes to do it. They were finding that the quality that the athletic trainers were expecting that meeting be did not match up with like what the first responders thought it should be. So just making sure that we're going over that information. But again, if a team does not do it, it's not a demerit. But again, it's in everybody's best interest that we do that. Any other questions?
In the this is Eric again. For the game day pre-game EAP review, that actually it states the game day administrator is in charge of that, correct?
Yes, they're the one that's responsible for making sure that it gets done. Now they may delineate that role to someone else. I know in my situation, my AD is at the gate, so I'm the game day administrator on the field until he's done at halftime. So it could be whoever is designated, but it is their responsibility.
Hey, Emily, I have a question for that. So I've had a couple white hats who have told me that's the same situation for us. My AD is usually at the gate or helping concession, like he's not on the field until halftime.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had white hats who straight up were like, you're not allowed to be the game day administrator. It has to be the AD regardless.
No, in the rule book, let's see. I remember where it's at.
Yeah, game day administrator does not have to be the athletic director. It can be admin from the front office. It can be yourself. It does not have to be the AD.
Yeah, we had issues with Lightning one time, and the white hat was like, I can only talk to the game day administrator who can't be you. And so we had to hunt my AD down. And I know it wasn't right, but it's like, how would you suggest, I guess, do you go to their booking agent about that? Like, how do you need to handle that?
So I would definitely talk with the booking agent, have your AD do it if it's been a consistent issue, or just print this rule out. I know they love when we put the rules back in their face, but it says it should be the AD, but if the athletic director is unavailable, he can designate a staff member to the game day administrator. If there's not any other personnel available, then it defers to the head coach. And so if you're that designated individual, that's you. So a lot of times, like, I'll introduce myself to the referees, let them know I'm the athletic trainer, and then I'm also their game day administrator until Mike comes to the field at halftime, and then I'll be notifying them in the event of lightning. And the game day administrator does not have to be the person who's notifying the officials. It could be whoever the game day administrator designated to notify the officials. But yeah, if you notice it's a consistent referee or something, work with the booking agent just to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Someone said, will the schools be getting demerits if they do not have proper Gefeller forms from MD office? I'm assuming yes to the demerits, but please also realize that the Gefeller-Waller forms are a state law that those should be filled out. That's not just an NCHSA recommendation. It is a North Carolina state law that if a high school athlete has a concussion or suspected concussion, that those forms are completed and filled out in full. So if your MD office that you typically refer to is using outdated forms, or they're using a different form that's not the Gefeller-Waller ones, just reach out to them, reach out to their practice manager, to the doctors, let them know, hey, these are the updated ones that need to be completed. There really shouldn't be an issue. They can just switch them out in their office. And it's important that you have those forms printed out. So like I always have like at least like 10 of those forms printed, stapled, ready to go for evaluations. So when I'll fill out the first sheet that has, the symptoms and the injury history and everything. And then it'll have all of the other forms attached behind it. So whenever they do go to the doctor, they don't even have to get a new form. They just have it with them right there, especially if they end up seeing, a pediatrician or someone that doesn't know what forms they need to be filling out. So that way they have everything needed. But that is a state law, so make sure that you're complying with that.
And with the new memorandum of understanding, the State Board of Education has to approve the demerit system. And so that's what's being waited on before it's published. But I do know at the coaches clinic, Q Tucker mentioned that sending an athlete that's not cleared from a concussion back into play would be the highest level on the demerit system. And the demerit system ranges anywhere from a letter of, hey, you did something bad, to suspension of coaches, forfeiting games, athletic departments being suspended. So there's a range, but returning a kid back from a concussion is going to be the highest level of the demerit system. Any other questions? All right, awesome. We appreciate all y'all coming, and we will also send a link to the recording of this so that you can go back and reference anything that you need to, or share it like with your athletic director or principal if you need to. So thanks.
Looks like we have a few stragglers. You want to just end the call and then we can just rejoin? Is that your personal Zoom or is it a different one?
No, I set up a meeting. No, I think I can, hold on.
Can you just force people out?
I think I can. Oh, they're leaving. Let's see. Okay, it's just 3 of us. Yeah, I totally forgot to hit record until like we were at the physical part. So yeah, what I was just gonna do was go back and we'll do that introduction section, and then Joanna, if you just want to do that. Well, no, I don't want to
for that.
Well, I won't hold y'all on, and I can do the first part. Let's see.
It's really just because you started doing it when I was talking. Was it in the EAP or was it just during intros? I can't remember.
It was the EAP.
Gotcha.
I'm realizing how, after hearing y'all present this, how lax the independent schools are compared to y'all. There's a lot more required for the NCH SSA versus I'm not seeing any, like, for example, the injury, one of the last questions, explain return to participation regarding injury and illness. I couldn't find anything like that for the independent schools.
Because your kids are paying for their education.
Yeah, that one was a new one. We start to get more and more stuff added in as like there's a lot of like consistent problems across the state. So we've always had a rule that if you missed 5 or more consecutive days, you had to have medical clearance.
I like that.
It didn't specify, like, I think it put who could provide that clearance, but when we had COVID, they created a form for that. And then they did one for the injury and illness. And I know we've talked about it in SMAC, like that form, like that specific form not being required, but using it as a documentation tool. Because I'm like, I'm happy if I get a note back from a doctor that says like, hey, they're cleared, or, you know, Johnny had mono and needs to be out from this time frame. And then I get a note that says Johnny's cleared to return after mono.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I don't need that separate form. Maybe I just, and like a lot of times I'll just staple it to that form and then have parents on.
Yeah.
And so we've talked about like, hey, it's kind of a pain in the butt to get that specific form filled out. Can you like just do the, like a documentation tool?
Yeah. And there's a lot that are identical to, like, both forms are identical, like the physicals and everything, which makes it easy.
Let's see. Yeah, Jenna, I was not recording here or this one, and I think it like popped in like
I think
right.
it popped up on this page. Yeah, I think so.
So we'll just do those two again after introductions, and then I'll record. Y'all can leave, and I'll record the physical part, and then I'll just mesh them together.
Sounds good. I'm glad you're tech savvy in that way. I would not be able to do that.
Well, I turned the recording off when I because I had it open for like 15 minutes setting stuff up, and I cut it off, and then I totally forgot to cut it back on. Alrighty, so we'll introduce